So I wanted to make this video about the facts of the Breonna Taylor case because it's a perfect example of the lie that made it halfway around the world before the truth could get its boots on. The story, as I heard it, as I'm sure you've heard it, is the cops show up at the wrong house, kick in the door, shoot her while she's sleeping. And on top of all that, the guy that they were looking for was already in custody. That's the way I heard it every time I heard it until I started looking into the case myself. And it turns out that most of that is just lies or half-truths told as lies. I'll go through some sources in a little bit, but first we'll start with just a quick rundown of what was actually going on. So it's true that she wasn't the primary focus of the investigation. The investigation was on Jamarcus Glover, which was Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend, but she was a big part of that investigation. Her name, her address, her vehicles, her phone numbers, pictures of her house, her social security number, all of them were part of the investigation. All of them were on the warrants. The evidence points to the fact that up to the night of March 12th, she was actively participating in the narcotics trade with Glover, at least keeping records for him and likely large amounts of money. And on top of all of that, she was part of a homicide investigation dating back to 2013, when there was a homicide victim discovered in the trunk of a car that was rented to her. So it was an accident that the cops were at that house. Secondly, she wasn't shot while she was sleeping. Her current boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who was present, said that they were in the hallway at the time that she was killed. He said that they had heard the cops knocking and asked who it was, and the cops didn't respond. According to the police, they said that they did announce themselves, but at any rate, it was also Kenneth Walker that fired the first shot. Injured one of the officers in the leg, and the officers returned fire, and it was the return fire that killed Breonna Taylor. Certainly not sleeping. And then for the third point that everybody says about having Jamarcus Glover already in custody, that point's not actually all that relevant. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but they weren't just looking for him. They actually had a handful of warrants for multiple places, basically all to be executed that night, in an attempt to secure as much evidence and as many people involved as possible. So whether or not he was in custody is more or less irrelevant. So most of those facts I haven't heard anywhere, like I said, but I do have sources for them, which are pretty easily obtainable. So I'd like to go over a few of those real quick. One is this collection of leaked documents that was released about a week ago at this point. These are probably the most hard to find, and I did go through and highlight some points. I won't go through all of them here on the video. Mostly I just want to make sure you're aware that they exist. So here on the first page, they're discussing the homicide investigation that goes back to 2013. And then is a note about some of the evidence that was secured, including surveillance systems, which is something that I'd like to get back to later. The going narrative is that she and Glover had broken up, 2 years ago, and that she shouldn't have been at all part of this investigation. And, here's recorded phone calls here in January of 2020 with, mutual I love yous and whatnot. Most of these documents are kind of boring. It just talks about the procedure where they were, the houses that they were monitoring and, the comings and goings, and then lots of recorded phone calls. This is a recorded phone call after Breonna Taylor was killed, where it's Glover and an unknown to me person. He says, "This is what you got to understand. Don't take it wrong, but Bree been handling my money. She been handling my money. She been handling S for me, and because it ain't just me. Hard to understand there, but he was saying, doing things for him. Later on in the conversation, he says, "Ain't no problem. I can walk in that house," meaning Taylor's, "and go directly to whatever it is. No problem with it." My apologies for my difficulty reading there. But as I said, I won't go through all of it. But basically, it does indicate pretty clearly that she was actively, participating in the business that he was running, which was illicit drugs and other things. Here's a couple of articles from the Courier Journal of Louisville that have pretty good details about what was going on. This article are basically just going over the myths surrounding the case and some of what was really going on. All of these are in the description, by the way. So, claim that the police were at the wrong apartment. It says, it goes over where that myth originated. It says, the search warrant for Taylor's home includes her street address, apartment number, and photos of her apartment door, which police later broke using a battering ram. Her name, birth date, and social security number are listed on the warrant, alongside the names of the narcotics investigation's main targets, Jamarcus Glover and Adrian Walker. They're false on that claim. This claim about whether the police had located the main suspect before the invasion of Taylor's home, as we discussed, that's largely irrelevant anyway, because they were looking for evidence at Taylor's home. This claim that Taylor was shot while she was asleep in bed. It says, Walker said he initially thought it might have been Taylor's former boyfriend, but there was no response when Taylor called out twice, "Who is it?" Then Walker said he grabbed his gun, saying he was scared to death. Taylor yelled again at the top of her lungs, asking, "Who is it?" Walker said in a recording. They got out of bed and were going to the door when it, quote, comes off its hinges. Walker fired one shot, unable to see who he was shooting at, according to his statement to the police. The police fired in response, striking Taylor multiple times. So again, their rating was false. Both Taylor and Kenneth Walker were in bed when they heard the banging on the apartment door, but they got out of bed before the police entered, and Taylor died on her hallway floor. Here's a second article, which basically is easier to read summary of the documents that were leaked a week or so ago. But it hits a few of the main points. Anyway, I won't go through the whole article. I just wanted to show you that it exists. But ultimately, the question is, why does any of that matter? Well, it matters because the going narrative of the Breonna Taylor case is the strongest case that people make for police reform or defunding the police or whatever. And the thing is, it's full of misinformation, and the truth does matter. Yes, the officers were in plain clothes. Yes, they came in the middle of the night. And yes, she tragically lost her life. But it's not obvious to me that the cause for any of that is racism. The evidence points to the fact that she was actively participating in narcotics trafficking. The first shot was fired from inside her house. Should she have died? Well, no. But does that mean that it's murder? Also, no, in my opinion. I don't see racism in any of this. And the debate about no-knock warrants is its own topic. But the truth is that they did evolve for a reason. And that reason was to minimize the destruction of evidence, which in this case may have well been justified, considering, among the evidence recovered from her apartment were the surveillance systems. And, you could even have a debate about the drug war, whether it should or shouldn't be a thing. But the thing is, those are the only sort of legitimate conversations that can be had around her case and her death. And they're pretty far from the conversations people are having.